Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Okay, we are recording now.
Yeah.
So I just asked really if anybody had any questions on what we talked about so far. And I was talking about it doesn't really make sense to allow somebody that hurt you 10 years ago or 20 years ago to keep hurting you today through resentment because you feel it again. Okay. So let's go to page 66 in the book. I think that's where we left off. And they use, we went over this last week, the really harsh words that they use, infinitely grave, fatal. Those are strong words that, so the message there is that this stuff's going to kill you if you don't take care of it. You got to be free of anger. Okay. So the next to last paragraph, page 66, says we turn back to the list. We're held the key to the future. We're prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle, and we talked about that, right? The entirely different angle is it doesn't matter who it was, or what they did, or what it affected, or what your part was. None of that is relevant anymore. At this point, you got a resentment. It's killing you. You got to get rid of it. Right, wrong, or indifferent. So now on the bottom of the page, it says, this was our course. We realized that people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. And this is what Melissa was referring to last week. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. The rest of this here is the resentment prayer. Okay. And we ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. So, and there's a story somewhere in the book in the second edition. I don't remember what story it is or where it's at, but it's in there. And people are always referring to that, a paragraph in that story as the resentment prayer. And talks about pray every day for 2 weeks or something like that. That is not the resentment prayer. Okay, that's just somebody's experience that's in the story there. Remember this, that the second edition came out in 1955. So from 1935 to 1955 is 20 years. It's not that they didn't have a resentment prayer, or 39 when the book came out. They always had the resentment prayer, and that's what I just read. That's the resentment prayer. Okay, not somebody's experience that came out in 1955. So here's the idea. Once you write down everybody, and when you're filling out your sheets and you're writing your thoughts, that you should always write top to bottom, rather than left to right. And the reason for that, there's a few reasons, but basically we'll change our mind 5 times if we go this way. So just write down who you're mad at, right? Just make a list of, and you learn something interesting at the end of that first column. You learn, God, look how mad I am at the world and everybody in it, right? Now, so many times over the years, people said to me, can you help me? I'm stuck on my fourth step. Where are you stuck? I'm still writing my resentments out. How long you been on the fourth step? 3 months. 2 months. Let me give you a little tip. Okay. If you can't think of who you're mad at, you're not mad at them. It's really that simple.
I do have some copies if someone wants to grab.
We're gonna, and I have a few, so we'll see how many she brings, and we'll try to get everybody one before the meeting. So, thank you. So don't rack your brain trying to figure out who you're mad at. If you're mad at them, put their name down. People, institutions, principles with whom you're angry. That's what the book says. So that's what you list. So if you put somebody's name down on, yeah, why don't you wait until later, honey? Yeah, why don't you wait till later, because I want to make sure everybody gets them and that they're all together. Okay, that's the way to wait till later. So what were we talking about? Principles, yeah. Yeah, so don't rack your brain, just write down who you're mad at. And then move on to the second column, and guess what? If you're mad at somebody and you put them in column 1, you know why. That's what goes in column 2. It's really simple. So you could actually sit down. I've worked with so many people over the years, and that they get stuck, and I just tell them, okay, here's the easiest way to do this. Come over to my house Saturday morning, and you'll sit down at the table, and you'll write out your 4th step. I might jump in the pool or do something while you're doing that, but pay me no mind. Just you sit. When you're done, you can go home. And that's happened many times over the years. Well, it's really that simple, because if you miss something or something comes up later, you got a 10th step to cover. So the idea, you shouldn't spend months on this. And the problem that a lot of people do is when they continue to write week after week, they never start off with the 3rd step. And we talked about that when we were doing the 3rd step. You have to bring God back into this with the 3rd, your 3rd step prayer, whatever that is. Otherwise, you're not doing a fearless and moral inventory. So if you stop writing and start writing again, you do your 3rd step prayer, you bring God into it, and you just knock it out. And don't worry about you don't need to edit. A lot of us, we like to edit it as we're going along. Just write it down and let your sponsor take care of that. Yay! Here's copies.
Sorry, FedEx system went down.
Okay, so we'll hand them out at the end of the meeting. These copies, the reason I was waiting is these copies have a couple of pages on there that I probably don't have on there. And they have just like a resentment prompt list, a fear prompt list, and then so you'll see when you get those, okay? And they're just the resentment prompt list and the fear prompt list. Oh, somebody's trying to get in. Is they're helpful. You just look at it and it'll trigger some things in your mind and help you write. But the important thing is just get it down. And then move on. You get it down and you go over it with your sponsor, okay? And then the last thing is, I think Chad talked about it last week, the justified resentments, right? And they're the same. We treat them the same way, because sometimes they're even harder, because just the fact that we feel that we're right, and it's not about being right or wrong. It's about, it's about saving your ass, not your face, so that's what we want to do. We just want to, the book says real or fancy, just get it on paper and we'll be okay. All right, back to page 67. After the resentment prayer, says we avoid a retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chances of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. Then it says, referring to our list again. Now this paragraph, the beginning of this paragraph is going to be your 5th column on the sheets that I'm giving you. And again, everything on your sheets is exactly out of the book. So when I give you the sheets, you'll see that your 5th column is this: referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done. We resolutely look for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? I think that's the 4th and 5th columns, right? Yeah, those are the 4th. The last sentence, where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? That's the 5th column. So all I did was take this paragraph and I broke it in 2. And the first part, I made column 4 because it tells us to refer to the list again. And the last sentence I made column 5. And when we go over this and it's very useful and very helpful, and it'll really show you, you'll really be able to pinpoint the exact nature of your wrongs when I show you how to go over these things after you've actually done the work. Okay, so now another note on the resentment prayer. So when you got your list and you're writing, when you're done with all your columns, chances are that a good number of your resentments have left you just from the writing process, just from writing and seeing who you're mad at, why you're mad at them, what it affected you, what your part was in it. Okay, and just from that process, you'll lose a lot of those resentments. In fact, you should lose most of them. Now, I want to tell you something. In column 4, on your sheets that I'm going to give you, which says, referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. That's column 4 on your sheets. So if you have a resentment, or whenever you're doing a fear list, the same thing, or a sexual, on any list you do, that column is the same. But if you have a resentment and you're mad at someone and you honestly believe that you had no part in it, okay? And you might be right. You know, once upon a time, some of us were victims of some things. Most of the time, you're not right with that, but there certainly could be times where you really had no part in it. Do not leave that column blank. This is very important. Okay, this is extremely important. So the 4th column, where it is asking you your part in this, do not leave that column blank, even if you honestly believe you had no part in it, that you didn't do anything to cause what they did to you. Okay, and maybe you just were a victim, or maybe somebody just screwed you over and you honestly didn't do anything to cause that. Do not leave that column blank. So what you're going to put in column 4 is your part, right? That's what the book says. But if you don't have a part in it, if you think that you really didn't have a part in it, then I want you to write in that column what you did and thought and felt from what they did to you. So column 4 should never be blank. I've had many people I've sat there and told them to face to face, and then they hand me their sheet. This column 4 is blank in some spots. Do not leave column 4 blank. So in other words, what you're going to put in column 4 is how you reacted to what they did to you. So you're either going to put your part, like the book is saying, where had we been, putting out our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes, right? That's what you're going to put in column 4. And if you have none there, then put how you reacted to what they did to you. Does that make sense? Very important. Yes.
You said did, something felt. I missed the middle one.
Said what?
When you said what I did, what I something, what I felt.
I have no idea what I said.
I'll see it on YouTube.
I have no idea what I said. But to sum it up, it's easier just to think how you reacted to what they did to you. Yeah. And sometimes the mouth goes and I don't even know what I'm saying. That was one of them. So it's important that you put something down in column 4. Now, when you see your sheets, there's going to be columns. Column 3 has 6 spaces in it. Your social instinct has 2 spaces. Your security instinct has 2 spaces. Your sexual instinct has 2 spaces. So there's 6 columns in column 3. And all you're going to do is put a check next to the one that you felt was affected. Try not to check them all. And when you go over it with your sponsor, or when you start sponsoring people using those sheets, you will, because they're very helpful. There's no need to have everything checked. Column 5 also has 4 boxes, I think. All right. The last part of this paragraph here. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? I think there's, can I see my? Yeah, so column 4, column 5 has selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened is one thing, and inconsiderate. So there's 4 columns in column 5. And again, just put a check mark. Try to only check the 2 most pertinent ones, because we like to check them all, because we really feel, we love self-pity, people like us. So we like, yeah, that was, but this is not about, this is how you reacted, see? So, and then column 3, there's 2 boxes for social instinct, self-esteem and personal relationships. You don't have to write it down because you'll have a copy of this. Security instinct, there's 2 columns, material security and emotional security. And in the sex instinct, there's 2 columns, acceptable sex relations and hidden sex relations. When we get into the sex inventory, we'll talk more about that, but just real quickly, if it's not your spouse or your partner, then it's a hidden thing, okay? So let me give you an example, and we'll talk more about this in the sexual thing, but since I mentioned it, let me give you an example. So let's say I'm married and I'm married to this one and I'm having an affair with this one, okay? And right now I'm inventorying this one. When I get to that column, it's a hidden sex relation. When I start inventorying about my partner with that situation, it's an acceptable sex relation. Not that the act was acceptable, but what happened was with an acceptable partner. So if it's not your...
Okay, so but what if it's your partner cheated with someone? Is that still acceptable? Like if your wife, for example.
Well, okay, good question. So if your wife is cheating with someone and you have her down as your resentment, it's acceptable sex relation. If you have the person she was cheating with down, it's a hidden sex relation. So it needs to be your partner, your spouse, not somebody else, a house or a mouse or something like that. Your partner, if it's not your partner, it's going to go in the hidden sex relation thing. Okay, we'll get into that more. So anyway, you're going to get these sheets. They're very helpful. This writing here is just instructions up here. And we just put these instructions here, but all the writing here is directly out of the big book. This just tells you how to fill it out. Okay, but everything here is out of the book. The only difference from the inventory here on page 65, I think, where there's 3 columns, is here you're going to see 5 columns, and I just explained why. I took that paragraph and I made 2 columns. It tells us to refer. If you don't do that, you'll have to have 3 columns, and you'll have to have another sheet, and you'll have to go back and refer to that list. I put it all together for you. So it really is helpful. All right. Anybody have any questions about resentments?
I know this is semantics, but the words are different. And so you keep saying your part and that kind of stuff, but it doesn't say that.
Well,
It was pointed out to me, and I think words are important in the way that
it says, here's what it says, referring to our list again.
Mhm.
Putting out of the minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes.
Right.
That means our part.
Means our mistakes. Because that's what it says.
Well, how do you, yeah, but now you're splitting hairs, because how do you find your mistake if you don't look at what part you played?
Well, they're my mistakes though. And
Right.
so,
The inventory is all yours.
correct.
Right.
But if it's a part, my brain works this way. You say my part, I'm gonna say it's only part of a whole, and somebody else has got the bigger part. And therefore I can't separate mine from theirs.
But
I'm just.
okay, but yeah,
my
no,
experience.
let me follow up with that though. You just said the key word is your inventory, right? It doesn't matter their part. Their part could be 99%. Let me finish. Their part could be 99%, your part could be 1. The book is asking you, where's your mistake?
Right.
Okay, so in order to write your mistake, right, and it's asking you, when it gets to the sex inventory, it's asking you, what could you have done instead, right? But if the book is asking you what your mistake is, right? So you have to write down what you did.
Right.
That's
and
your part.
Well, it's my mistake, and I know I'm splitting hairs,
Yeah, you're splitting hairs.
but that's what the book says, and I really believe in.
But it's the
every
same
word.
thing. There's no,
Maybe to you, but the way I process it is different, so.
but there's no difference between your mistake and your part. What difference is there?
The way in my brain.
Okay,
That's all I'm saying.
but your brain is
I'm just telling you. It just,
Somebody
it-
needs
it-
to come
it's worked with people that I've worked with to allow them to look at it, what it says.
But, okay,
So,
I see. So for you, I see what you're saying, but to say that the book is not asking for your part is wrong.
I didn't say, I said what the book says is to look for our mistakes.
Right. So let's say there was a situation. Let's say something happened with the four of us, right? And now you're gonna inventory that because you're mad at the three of us, okay? You're saying it's easier for you to write down your mistake than to think about what your part was? Really? I would
My
say,
mistake, my fault, my wrong.
but how do you know you even made a mistake? Maybe the three of us screwed you around. But if you think about what your part was in the situation, you'll come up with your mistake. But if you think about your mistake, you won't come up with your part.
But I do.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Huh?
I make a motion, we change the word on the phone.
That's how you change the form, I'll just put-
I mean, how would you differentiate that in?
It's already been
thoughts?
properly
As part
seconded.
as opposed to a mistake? Because what you're saying is
Hold on, guys.
you're analyzing the situation. And what she's saying is that this is what.
disregarding everybody else.
So
That
what
you
about where it
analyze.
says where words are blank?
I think it's that it's comparing.
That would be your
it-
mistake.
I think it's comparing it to the other person. I think that's a part. That makes inherently that there are two parts to the whole.
Right.
So
it could
identifying
be
it
10
as its
parts
own
to the whole.
mistake is as its own whole, as opposed to a
Part
a
of.
part of a whole.
No, that's not, you're totally misinterpreting that.
So you're.
Totally, totally it doesn't mean a part of what you did. What role did you play?
Right.
What scenario happened that you were a part of? That's the only way I can come up with my mistake. Is let's look at the whole thing, right? So sometimes knowing the mistake is easy. And sometimes it's not. I have to look at the whole scenario, what happened. Okay, but what the book is saying that we putting out of their minds what they did.
Right.
So they're not in the equation. How did I feel, act, and react to what happened? Right? That's my part. That's my part of the situation. And from there, I can see what my mistake was.
I think both are a good conversation, because I think working with a newcomer who's doing their 4-step, they could say, I don't have a part in this, or they could say, I didn't make any mistakes. And so being able to kind of
Yeah.
pull that apart here.
I'm not
kind of
saying
makes
they're
it
saying that-
easier to help
Yeah, I'm not
somebody
saying
find-
mistakes is
Yeah.
wrong or bad.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that what she originally said was that she was referencing that the book doesn't say part, so therefore that infers that to say part is wrong.
Oh, I didn't say that.
Okay, that's how I took
I
it.
just said that
Yeah.
the way that I interpret that is.
Yeah.
You say
This is
my
his
part of
big
it, the way I.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all.
Okay, so however you want to look at it. Yeah, that's fine.
We're here to help.
Yeah, all right. Anybody got any other questions on the resentment list? All right. Let's move on then. Oh, here's what I want. In the 12 and 12, it gives us a list of the 7 deadly sins. And long time ago, I looked up all 7 words and I found they each have lots of definitions to them. But I pulled out some definitions that were pertinent to us, what we do here. And not in any particular order, but I find it interesting that what some of these definitions of these words are. So the word pride, there's a few definitions that I use. Too high an opinion of oneself, of one's importance or superiority. Another definition for pride is arrogant behavior. Another one is to be proud of, take credit for. And over here in AA, we kind of ask that you do things anonymously. do a kind deed anonymously. And then greed. And greed, the definition for greed is an eager or selfish desire, especially for wealth, food, or drink. You know, more, right? Another definition for greed is excessive passion for things. Excessive passion for things. So you can see how these words have a negative to them, and that's where we've warped them. Lust. And it's a strong sexual desire, especially when uncontrolled. Another definition is a passionate or overmastering desire. Another definition is exceeding proper limits for sexual desires. And this last definition I found very interesting. The word lust in the dictionary says a craving. I found that interesting. The word anger, a strong passion or emotion excited by injury or rage. Another definition, to excite to wrath, enraged. And another definition is a strong feeling of displeasure and belligerence. You can easily see how those things block us, right? Gluttony. Gluttony is interesting. Of course, it's eating too much is one, but there's another definition that's interesting. Eager for anything in excess. That covers pretty much all of my envy. To grudge another person's good fortune. Or pain or distress excited by the sight of another's superiority or success. Just seeing somebody being successful it makes you envious. And the last one is a sense of discontent or jealousy about or desire for another's advantages or possessions.
Say that one again.
A sense of discontent or jealousy about or desire for another's advantages, possessions. You know, in other words, can't believe he got that promotion. Or look at that bitch in that new car, you know. Those kind of things, right? Sloth. Inactive, sluggish, unnaturally heavy, or to avoid exertion. I that one was me, you know, because I told you guys before I'm a dreamer and a fantasizer, right? And my whole life was I could do that tomorrow. Especially getting high or getting drunk. I don't do shit, you know. I do that tomorrow, you know. And as we learn when we get sober, tomorrow never comes. Tomorrow's the day for the loser. All we have is here and now. So recovery is about removing these things that block us from the sunlight of the spirit. So we have to get closer to God in order to do that. And that's what they're talking about on this last page. On page 66, actually. Okay. So again, any other questions on resentment? And now that you have some of these definitions on these 7 deadly sins, it's helpful. All right. So we're going to talk about fear. This is very interesting. Every human being is born with two fears. Scientific fact.
Fear of falling and loud noises.
Yes.
Stole
That's
his
right.
thunder.
Two fears. Fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. Every human being is born with those two fears. You know what that means? That's right. All other fears are learned. As we grow up, through our childhood, our preteens, our teen, as we grow up, we learn all these fears. They're all learned. So if they're learned, they can be unlearned, or they can be countered. It's a better word.
So is that, so that's like primitive, like fear, right?
What?
So born with fear of falling and loud noises, so that's,
Well, if you take an infant
right,
and you go like that, right?
Yeah.
They react to that, right?
right.
And if you make a big loud noise in front of them, they'll react to that too, right?
Yeah.
Those are the God-given instincts that they have. You'll have to ask God why he did that. My take on it is, somewhere along the way they're there to protect us, but yeah. So, my fear of falling wound up to be, growing up, fear of heights. When I got sober, I had a fear of heights. I'll talk to you about that. Even though I lived in New York City and we used to have parties on the rooftops and stuff, I was okay with that. But I still, to this day, have, it's a lot better, but it's still there. All right, let's see what the book says. 67. Notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? And if you go back to page 62 real quick, second paragraph. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run right, though he usually doesn't think so. So that kind of explains what they just said there. Sometimes we think fear ought to be classified with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even if though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. So column 1 on your sheets is going to be, what are you afraid of? And then column 2 is going to be, why? Okay. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. Perhaps there is a better way. We think so. For we're now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We're in the world to play the role he assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us and humbly rely on him Does he enable us to match calamity with serenity? And we said that that is the second step promise. The third step promise. Now, this next paragraph, he says, we never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality is the way of weakness. Paradoxically, is the way of strength. And this is the fear prayer. The verdict of ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. Thank you. Okay, so let's put together everything we just read, these 3 paragraphs here. Fear prayer. That's the fear prayer. We just went over the resentment prayer. And now when you do your fear inventory, at the end of your fear inventory, a lot of your fears should have gone away. And whatever ones are left, this is what you have to look at. Okay, this is the fear prayer. You want to each resentment that is left, you want to go to the resentment prayer and pray on that specific thing. To each fear that is left, you want to do the same thing with this prayer. But let's look at these 3 paragraphs together. The book says, perhaps there is a better way. We think so. We're now on the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite self. Does anybody in here, raise your hand if you don't understand the definition of the word infinite? Okay. Infinite means it can't be measured. There's no beginning or end. It just goes on. Okay. Finite is the opposite. Finite means it can be measured. There's a beginning and an end. So it says, now that we're on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God, we trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. Now, in the first paragraph, it talks about, why do I have these fears? Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Does everybody understand what that means? Self-reliance? Does anybody not understand what that means? Self-reliance means you're relying on self. Okay, self-reliance. When you rely on yourself, this fails us. That's what the book is saying. Self-reliance failed us. So now it's saying that we're on a different basis. We got to trust an infinite God rather than our finite selves. So each and every person has limits. Each and every person is finite in their abilities. They're all different. Vic may be on a scale like this on something where I'm on a scale like this on the same topic, right? So we're all different, but each of us is finite. There is a beginning and end of what we're capable of doing and being in different things. None of us are infinite in our faculties and our beings. Okay, none of us. God is. So they're saying if we learn to tap into an infinite God, okay, so and I have these fears because I keep relying on myself. And self-reliance failed us. So now he's saying the verdict of ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. So now I shared with you that one of my fears when I got sober was heights. Now, I'm okay being on the roof and looking over the roof down to this. I'm okay with that. But I couldn't climb a ladder. I needed 5 people to hold the ladder if I had to climb a ladder because it would shake so bad. And when I got sober and I got to this point in my recovery, now in the Bronx, we have brownstones, and a brownstone is about 6 stories high. And what I had to do, see, back in the second step, there was something that we went through. And it asked us, is God everything or is he nothing? What was our choice to be? Remember that? Don't forget that. You're going to need it here. You're definitely going to need it here. So when I was faced with this fear and I'm getting sober, I need to overcome my fear. 4 or 5 of us went to my neighborhood. They put a ladder up the side of the building. And they said, go ahead, Danny, climb up to the roof. And I was like, can't do it. And they asked me, is God everything or is he nothing? And I said, he's everything. Well, if he's everything, and all men of faith have courage, they trust their God. Right? Instead of our relying on our self-reliance, we ask God to demonstrate through us what he can do. And we ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be. And at once, we commence to outgrow fear. So here I am on the ground, and I got these 4 or 5 guys with me. And there was a guy up on the roof too. And I said, got everything? God's everything. Well, why don't you act like it? And I climbed the ladder, 1 little step at a time, shaking like a son of a bitch. But I made it to the top. When I got to the top, I threw my leg over and dove onto the roof. And I laid there like I was dying. Yeah. So then I started walking to the door to go in the building, and doors locked in. Gotta climb down. I said, there's no friggin' way I can do that. I can't do it.
So I have a question, or you're just talking about fear of heights, because you said that, so fear of falling, fear is okay to have though, right? But your fear of heights. I guess the other opposite, right?
That's a really good question. You know why? Did everybody hear what she said? Any fear is good to have, because fear in and of itself warns you of danger. Okay, maybe not every fear, because I'm sure we could come up with some fears that got nothing to do with danger to start thinking. But normally, a fear.
I was gonna say, I on that too. Always either or negative. I always get it mixed up. Are there healthy fears?
Well, fear itself is healthy. It's just like, here's a good way to put this. Were you here when we talked about the 3 basic instincts of life? Okay. Those were all God-given, therefore good and healthy. We take them out to left field and warp them. Right? So if I have a fear of heights, that in itself is good and healthy. But if it warps me and stops me from performing and doing what I need to do in life, that's unhealthy.
What about the negative emotions?
Like, give me an example. What's negative emotion?
People say like,
well, yeah, because the fear, like, there's common fears that kind of blanket, umbrella them all, is like not getting what I want, a fear of losing something I think I have, a fear of not getting what I want. There's really 3 kinds, or a fear of what are they going to do when they find out. That one's a son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are they going to do when they find out, right? So those things are all what would bring up the fear, right? And
Jody has her hand up.
Jody, go ahead, Jody.
No, I think you just answered my question, but I don't know how to get my hand down now.
Okay.
I was
Boy,
just
I'm good. I
okay,
answered your
I was
question
just
before I
gonna
even
ask.
heard it. All right. That's
I was
pretty damn
just
good.
gonna ask that about, like, is it just a matter because you're trying to show of the trust to the higher power, or like he was saying about, is it like simple fears of like I'm scared to go to jail versus fears of like fears of not being good enough, not being worthy, those kind of things. And I think
Yeah, but
that's
you
what
see,
you were
that's
saying.
when we get into 6 and 7, we're going to go deep into what you just asked, because that's not really a fear. That's usually, well, just in a nutshell, 6 and 7, usually the action is never the defect. Okay. So we label something by the action, and when we really inventory and look at it, we find out that that's not the defect. There's underlining things that cause that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But we'll talk about that in 6 and 7. So, okay. So here I am. I got to get down from the roof. Okay.
You're crying like that.
And yeah, that sounded like me. That's pretty much how I sounded that day. Pretty close. I was a little louder, I think. But so here I am, and again, and you know, they asked me again, is God everything or is he nothing? I say he's everything. Well, why don't you act that way? I love that saying. You know how many times, a million times over the years, I've told other people that. Where's God in all this? Whatever's going on. Where's God in all this? Is God everything or is he nothing? He's everything. Well, why don't you act that way? Well, I've been using the shit out of that one all these years. But I said God's everything. Well, why don't you act that way? And then I go through the fear prayer again. Well, all men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be at once we commence to outgrow fear. Now, I did that. I threw my leg over the thing, and I found a rung, and I went down the ladder a lot quicker than I went up. I almost slid all the way down. And I had the guy at the top holding the ladder because I wouldn't do it without him holding the ladder. So now when I got down to the bottom, did I lose my fear of heights? No. But I did learn something. I learned that if I trust and rely upon an infinite God rather than my finite self, and I ask God to help me lose my fear and direct my attention to what he would have me be, that at once I commence to outgrow fear. Now, over the years, I've gotten so much better at it. Now, if I have to get on a ladder, I will. If I had a choice, I won't. But there's no hesitation, and I'm not like that child anymore, crying that I have to do it. I can do it. I prefer not to. I still don't like those kind of heights. Okay. Somebody's on there. So putting those 3 paragraphs together are real important because they kind of work with each other and they make sense. Now, when you have your list, and actually, how many lists do we have here?
There is 30 sets.
30 sets. Okay.
31.
31. So let me give you this. Do not write on these. You guys just need one, right? You want to take one and pass them down? I get one there. Yes, I got it for you.
I tried to separate them, so they're
Oh, they're not.
separated out.
Are they not in order? Wait, did I not?
They're separated by sections.
You should have. Okay, yeah, you should have 4 inventory sheets, 2 prompt lists, and this other basic instincts of life to create self. Okay. So I don't know if the copies that you grabbed earlier have those other sheets on there. Okay. So if there's any left over, you grab those. Okay. So again, when you get those sheets, and those of you online, if you're still somebody out there that still needs them. Oh, I want to say this. I keep getting people asking me why I'm not doing this anymore after 29 years, Doug.
You don't want to make it even 30.
The last 3 years, this year and the last 2 years, we've been recording it and it's on YouTube. So I don't feel the need to keep doing it. Just look on YouTube. But I keep getting people asking me, and I am not quitting recovery. I am still available to do conventions and like workshops and weekend fundraisers where they do, like we've done big book studies for the whole weekend. And so anybody that's doing a convention or needs to get a fundraiser or wants to have a workshop, I'm still doing those things. Okay. Besides the being on YouTube, and I'm not trying to, it's not a cheap shot to plug my book, but I wrote this book some years ago, and it's called The 20 Most Misunderstood, Misinterpreted Mistakes of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, this book does not tell you how to work the steps. We have a big book for that. All it does is talk about everything kind of stuff that we've been talking about, the misinterpretations and mistakes that people make. And so between that and being on YouTube, 3 years worth of stuff, I just don't feel the need to do this anymore. But I'll be glad to do a workshop for anybody that needs one.
Sorry, what book is that?
The 20 Most Misunderstood, Misinterpreted Mistakes of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Or you could just put my name in Google and it should come up. So, so between those things, that's the reason I'm not going to continue doing this.
Well, the YouTube's nice because you can stop you and
Yeah, there's a lady on here that bitches at me. She hates it because it takes her 3 hours to watch a 1 hour thing. She keeps rewinding it and putting it back. But so all the information that we've talked about all these years is there. We got 5 minutes left. I want to finish up fears next week, and then we'll do sexual conduct and harms to others, and then we'll move on to the 5th step. And the weeks are going to kind of get a little quicker because there's not, once we finish this 4th step, we start knocking the steps off. Okay. So anybody got any questions about what we talked about? Does that make sense, putting those 3 paragraphs together where self-reliance failed us, and then infinite God rather than our finite selves, and then the fear prayer? Does all that make sense? Nobody's got any questions about that?
Yeah, Danny, I've got a question.
Go ahead.
I emailed you and you sent me.
Was that Tom Adams?
No, this is Bob Chamberlain in Winchester.
Oh, hi, Bob.
Yeah, you sent me 4 sheets: review of fears, conduct, harms to others, and review of resentments. Now, I get the impression from what you've just said that there are a few more sheets available.
There are, and I don't think I have them online.
Okay, I'll email you. I'll email you for those.
Yeah, I think it's nothing that I did. It's something that I pulled up over the years. One is called the resentment prompt sheet. The other is a fear prompt sheet. And you can pretty much go online, and I think you'd be able to find them. All it is just a bunch of like resentments. It has people, institutions, principles, and they give you a list of stuff to help, just to prompt your thinking when you're doing your 4th step.
Okay. All right, I'll look for that.
Okay. Ginger can send it to you if you email her. What is your email?
I'll put my email in the chat.
She's going to put her email in the chat.
Okay, great.
And if you email Ginger, she can send you those 3 sheets.
Okay, great.
At no additional charge.
What page in the 12 and 12 did you say that talked about the 7? Do you know the page?
The 7 deadly sins.
Okay.
Yeah. It's on the bottom left-hand column page.
That's how we do it.
Yeah, I don't remember the page numbers. I know what it was though.
Right. I just said that yesterday.
So basically, when we talk about these fears, right? 48, thank you.
Thank you so much. So much nicer.
When we talk about fears, it's really all about without God. Without God, I fear, you can fill in the blank. With God, there's not much I fear. Nothing really. If I learn to trust and rely upon an infinite God rather than my finite self, and I ask him to remove my fear and direct my attention of what he would have me be, the book says at once I commence to outgrow fear. I have found that true. Now that fear comes back, so I gotta do it again. And that fear comes back, I gotta do it again. You know, we're pretty, we've kind of roll ourselves into a certain way over the years, and it's not gonna overnight dissipate and be something different. And when we get to 6 and 7 and we see that talk about the defects of character, you're gonna realize that these things have been fine-tuned and honed perfectly over the years. And we've learned them just like we've learned these fears, right? If a child is only born with the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises, we've learned all the other fears. Well, we have to counter that. And that's what we're doing here. So we'll pick up next week, same time, same channel. We'll finish this off. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks for making those copies. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, cost me $20. I couldn't do it at the house.
Oh, here, let me give you the money. Hey, don't disappear. I got a trunk load of shit for Tony. Yeah. All right. All right, guys. Did you put your email? Okay, Ginger's email is on there. All right, guys.
Yeah, yeah.
Take care. See you next week.